All right, welcome everyone. Want to thank you for attending. Do I really have to write an essay, Making Writing Relevant for the HSE and Beyond with Krawiec today? My name is Lauren Osowski. I am from Pro Literacy, and I'm also joined here by my colleague Danielle Zimmerman to help out answer questions in the chat and Q&A. If you have any technical problems, feel free to raise your hand or post it in the chat and we can help you to troubleshoot that. Next slide. We are recording today. Within 1 week after the webinar, you will receive a follow-up email with links to the webinar recording with the slide deck from Kara. Also a webinar summary sheet that you can share with your colleagues, the chat and Q&A transcripts, and those who attend live will also receive a certificate for attending the webinar. And again, we'll send all of that out to you via email within 1 week after the webinar. Next slide. For those who are not familiar with the Zoom controls, you can use the chat function on the bottom of your screen or perhaps at the top. You may need to drag it from the top or bottom. Use the chat to introduce yourself, share links or resources with the group, or ask questions of the fellow attendees. We will also share the links in the chat at the end of the webinar in that follow-up email. You can use the Q&A function to ask content questions. We will ask the presenter the questions, and it actually makes it easier for us to track those questions, make sure we get to all of them and don't miss anything if you post the questions for the presenter in the Q&A as opposed to the chat. So please use those two functions below. Next slide. So now I will pass it over to Kara Krawiec, and she will get us going with this incredible webinar about HSE writing. Take it away, Kara.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I know you can't see my face, so this is my face. Yes, I'm so happy to be here today. Thank you, Lauren and Danielle and all of Pro Literacy for setting this up. I'm very excited to talk to you about this topic today. So first, though, I wanted to introduce myself. And I would like to share with everybody that any presentation that I do, I always want to make sure it's a dialogue. It's not something where I am just going to be presenting information and participants are expected to kind of sit passively. This is something that definitely is a conversation. I want to be able to share ideas. I want to get feedback from you. Also then, as we move forward and think about the coaching sessions, I want to be able to have some takeaways to really be able to help focus those as well. So again, your participation will be so greatly appreciated. But first, my name is Kara. I have my Master's of Arts in Literature, and I never thought, honestly, that I wanted to teach until in graduate school. I was able to do some teaching as part of my assistantship, and I realized that my heart is in the classroom. It was just something that when I used to tell people I want to be an English major, they'd always be like, oh, so you want to teach? And I'd be like, no, I want to read, I want to write, I want to, I don't know. But then really I found my true passion with teaching. And then specifically working with non-traditional learners on developmental reading and writing skills. So I have 10 years of teaching experience, and I have 6 years of experience as the East Side Site Coordinator for Seeds of Literacy, which is a nonprofit in Cleveland, Ohio. And as you all can guess, with a degree in 20th century American Lit, I love reading. So that was something that I wanted to be able to share with our students. So it is something I have been able to integrate into our programming, and I started a book club, which absolutely exploded and was a wonderful surprise. And I ended up being able to accept the inaugural Pro Literacy Hero Award on behalf of Seeds in recognition of that work. And of course, then I have presented at several local, state, and national conferences. I don't know if anybody was just at Pro Literacy last week. I was there, and if you were there and happened to attend my session there, hi, it's good to see you again. But yeah, we definitely are going to be covering a lot of ground today, so I really want to dig into it. So first and foremost, I want to explain the title of my webinar. So I chose to title this with a question that I'm often asked about writing. So my students often ask me, do I really have to write an essay? So this is something that I hear all the time from our students as we are getting ready, especially for that language arts portion of either the GED or the HiSET. So I want to know, what are the questions that your students ask most for the HSE exam? But then also, what are your concerns about teaching writing for those exams? So if you wouldn't mind putting your answers in the chat, again, I'd love us to be able to really have a conversation about this. So especially as we move forward with those coaching sessions. So take a couple minutes and please let me know, what are those common questions? And then what are your concerns? Yeah, how long does it have to be? Yes, yes. That is almost the second most asked question, right? How long is it? Absolutely. Let's see, what other questions do we get? I get to pick my topic. How many paragraphs? How important is comma usage? Oh my goodness. Yes, focusing on punctuation and mechanics. Students get very concerned about the grammar aspect. Yeah. Do I have to write about this topic? Yes. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Yes. Will I have enough time? Yeah, the GED essay. We're going to talk about that formatting. Yes. Oh, okay. And thank you also for putting in some of your concerns. Again, there will be a transcript of everything in the chat, as well as then a recording from today. So we're going to be able to really make sure we hopefully cover as much of that as possible. Yeah, it's a very complex task. Thank you so much, Steve, for that. Absolutely. Yeah. That's a lot to accomplish within such a short period of time. Yeah, absolutely. How important is spelling? Oh my goodness. Yes. How many sentences do I need? Can I pass without actually writing an essay? Yeah, do I really have to write an essay? Okay. So yes, these are all the kinds of things that we want to hopefully be able to address today and in the coming weeks then when I'm able to meet with you again for these coaching sessions. So today then, I'm going to talk about making writing relevant and accessible. If there's one thing you take from this session, please, please, please make it that writing should be relevant and accessible first. Before we even start to get into that academic writing, we want to make sure it is relevant and accessible for our students. And then next, we're going to talk about demystifying academic writing and grammar. Because again, as many of you pointed out, grammar and mechanics often tend to be one of the first questions that students ask about writing, when really, as we know, it is such a complex task that really it is one of the last things we want to be focusing on with students. Thank you all. Yeah. And then we're going to talk about how to approach the HSE essay sections. I want to give you some tangibles, some things you can take away from today and really implement them into your classrooms and see how they work. So yes, thank you so much. And feel free again, if you have any questions, put that in the Q&A. But also again, I'm going to be asking you to participate more in that chat. So first and foremost, I always want to stress, strong readers become strong writers. When I was in college, one of my professors told me, and it has always stuck with me, in order to be a strong writer, you first have to be a strong reader. And that's where I start with my students. So as I mentioned, I was able to start a book club at Seeds of Literacy, and the results have been absolutely incredible. It's something I wasn't expecting, but really the important thing that I noticed is bridging that gap between reading as something academic and reading as something social, creating that lifelong love of learning. I won't spend too much time talking about my book club right now. However, I am doing another session in a few months on reading comprehension, and we'll dig in to reading a little bit more. But I want to just stress that in order to help our students the most with the writing aspect of the test, we have to help show that correlation between reading. And one of the many ways we can do that is by instilling that lifelong love of reading. And also then, of course, making it contemporary, making it something that students can connect to. Because as we all know, the HSE reading materials are not always the most relatable, I guess we could say, not always the most accessible, all of that public domain, right? So it makes it difficult for our students to connect to what they're reading. So we want to give them something that they can really connect to. And also then it can help to encourage students to go out and find reading in other aspects of their lives. Again, kind of bridging that divide between thinking about it as something so separate from our everyday lives. So here I just have a picture. I had invited some students to participate in a ladies book club night that was hosted by a local organization in Cleveland. And it was something that our students just really strongly responded to. And actually several have come back because they have enjoyed it so much, and outside of just coming with other students. So instilling that strong sense of why we need to read. And here then I have a quote: literacy is really the gateway to activating democracy. We become better activists, better engaged citizens, better community members, when we can use language, knowledge, and education to communicate and actualize social change. So here, that's what we want to stress. Actually, when I was talking to Todd Evans about my presentation, he really succinctly and nicely put it, that reading is how others communicate with us, but then writing is how we communicate with others. So really showing that strong connection, that it's a conversation, it's how we get involved. Is absolutely what we want to stress. And I picked Amanda Gorman because I wanted to share a little bit about currently what I'm doing in my book club and the power of poetry. So currently we are reading Amanda Gorman's collection of poetry, Call Us What We Carry. And this is an exercise I do with my students. So I want everybody to pick a line or two that stands out from this poem and write in the chat why. So as I read the poem to you, I just want you to listen and to pick out a line or two from this poem. All right. The Shallows. Touch deficient and light starved we were, like an inverted flame, eating any warmth down to its studs. The deepest despair is ravenous. It takes and takes and takes. A stomach never satisfied. This is not hyperbole. All that is gorgeous and good and decent is no luxury, not when its void brings us to the wide wharf of war. Even as we stand stone still, it's with the entirety of what we've lost, sweeping through us like a ghost. What we have lived remains indecipherable, and yet we remain. And still we write, and so we write. Watch us move above the fog like a promontory at dusk. Shall this leave us bitter or better? Grieve, then choose. All right, so again, I'm going to give you a moment to sit and reflect, but pick a line, pick two that really pop out to you, and please tell me why. Yeah, Mary, thank you so much. Just that word grieve, yeah, it pops. Yeah, the visual arrangement is like a third language. Oh, thank you. Beautifully said. Oh, the deepest despair is ravenous. It takes and takes. Yeah. Wide wharf of war. Oh, the alliteration. Yeah. Touch deficient. Watch us move above the fog. Yes, adult educators, encourage learners to move above the fog. Monica, that's beautiful. Yeah, and still we write. Yes, these are all beautiful, beautiful things to bring out, right? And the reason why I chose poetry is for my book club currently is because it plays with language, right? As many of you have pointed out, that alliteration, the format of it becomes its own language, right? The way it is visually on the page, the way that we see it, the way that we experience it, the power of words. It's a great way to introduce students to writing, and then asking them to respond can be another way then to bridge that connection to say, okay, we've read something, but now let's reflect, let's write something of our own. Yeah. Oh, thank you guys so much for participating in the chat. It's really gorgeous. I just want to keep reading all of your comments. But yes, so one of the exercises that you can do with students is exactly this. Just that little bit of writing, that little bit of just, please respond, please think about why something is moving you. That's asking students to write without fear of how it's going to come across, right? We're not worried about grammar. I'm not worried about your sentence structure. I'm worried just about how you feel. Another exercise you can do with students when working with poetry like this is also just to take all of those lines that students pick out and rearrange them and come up with your own poem then as a group. It takes the emphasis off of having, and kind of maybe the fear of having to write something, and instead it's just being able to use what's already there. And it's a beautiful way to show students just how to play with language and why we're writing. So using something like poetry becomes so much more accessible for students, and it also then makes it so much more real. So thank you all. Yes. I love still getting to see all these comments. Absolutely. And the questions that they bring. Thank you. All right. So as I mentioned, one of the things I want to stress most throughout this entire presentation is making writing relevant and accessible to our students. So as we saw in that last example, poetry can be a great way just to kind of bridge between reading and writing, showing that, as Todd said, reading is the way that others communicate with us, but writing is the way we communicate back. So yes, asking students to reflect is one of the quickest and best ways to really get them comfortable with writing, because of course, we're always kind of taught, write about what you know, right? If you're not certain to write about what you know. And what do we know better than ourselves? So some of the short and quick ways we can do that is to pull out exercises like a what did you learn today, using an exit ticket just at the end of every day, asking students, to write down a quick sentence, just, I learned X today and I felt so good about it. And then of course I also put an example here of just asking students to write goals for themselves and what they're hoping to achieve for that upcoming year. It's just, again, a way for students to see writing as personal and not just academic. And the more we can help students see that writing is not something to shy away from, not something to be afraid of, it's not just grammar and mechanics and punctuation, it is so much more than just that small editing process, then we can really help them find their voices, because ultimately it is, writing is what allows us to find our voice, and we want to encourage our students to feel that they are heard and they are seen. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's so helpful to partner with other organizations and to find other organizations in your community that may be able to just encourage that interest in writing that goes beyond just the classroom. So for instance, Seeds of Literacy, we were fortunate enough to be able to partner with a creative writing nonprofit in Cleveland named Literary Cleveland, and they offered some creative writing workshops for students and other members of the general community. And they actually published then 2 books out of it, called Cleveland Stories and then Cleveland Stories Part 2. And several of our students were able to be published in that work. and really being able to then see your work published and see then your words printed on a page like that is something that can be so inspirational and make writing feel so much more accessible. So I would encourage you guys to think about what organizations may be in your community that you could partner with and kind of help bring this all forward. Also then, of course, a lot of adult education programs may be able to partner with each other. In the state of Ohio, we publish a book called Beginnings. It's all under the Aspire programming. And it's all student writing, and being able to really see that, yes, I can do this. Yes, I have a voice. Can be so beneficial. And actually, the woman in the very center picture in the yellow shirt, her name is Rose, and she's a wonderful student who started taking these creative writing workshops and absolutely blossomed out of it. It was so wonderful to see that she just started writing poetry every single day. She'd come to class with like a poem on the tip of her tongue, and she'd write down a line, and then by the end of class she'd have almost a full poem. And it was really beautiful just to see the growth in her self-confidence, the growth in how she felt about writing, and how she used it then as an expression of, this is who I am, and this is me. And that's what we want to encourage in students. We want to see that love of writing before we ever try to introduce then that idea of academic writing, right? So transitioning to academic writing can seem very intimidating, right? So one thing I always like to stress to students is this quote. So the best academic writing has one underlying feature: it is deeply engaged in some way with other people's views. Too often, however, academic writing is taught as a process of saying true or smart things in a vacuum. So again, going back to this idea that writing is a conversation. What we're doing today is a conversation, and it is that response. So rather than thinking about academic writing as something separate and something that we are disconnected from, helping to remind students, you are already writing, you are already a part of this conversation, you are already engaged in a way that we ask in order to do that quote unquote academic writing. I'll talk a little bit more about this book later on. However, a wonderful, wonderful book that I would recommend picking up even just to peruse at in your own time or as part of your classroom is called The Moves That Matter in Academic Writing. I have used this very frequently in my classes, and it's something that introduces that idea of academic writing, but then also uses templates to help with that as well. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but absolutely recommend. All right, so now I want to know about your writing process. So not about our students, about yours. So what is your own writing process as a writer? I want to think about, how do you approach it? So say I'm going to ask you all to write a reflection after this. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that, but let's just say I'm going to ask you to write something after this. How would you approach it? What's your process? Let's start there. So please put that in the chat. And I will also write mine, because we always want to model what we'll do with our students, right? I want to make sure that, again, it's about that conversation, and the best way to help students see that writing can be approachable is by doing it yourself. All right, I see free thought. I see organizing your ideas, brainstorm. Yeah, draft, revise, publish. Yes. Brainstorming, mind mapping. Excellent. Yeah, let's see. Journaling, that's wonderful. Jump in and fine tune it later. Yeah, okay, narrowing down in an organized fashion. Excellent, okay. Planning first, graphic organizers. Ah, wonderful. That's so great to see. So what's the most difficult part for you? Starting, yes. Often starting is the most difficult part. Yeah. Oh, the first sentence. Oh my gosh. Yeah, let me tell you, writing that first sentence can be so difficult, right? Okay, introduction. Yeah, absolutely. Dealing with perfectionism. Steve. Okay, it's after my own heart. I am the exact same way. My process, as I put in the chat, is that yes, I just start writing, but then I immediately go into editing mode. I have a very difficult time separating those two steps. Yeah. Difficult editing. Yeah, absolutely. So what part do you think our students find most difficult? Yeah, thinking it just has to be one way. Absolutely. Lack of confidence. Yeah. The idea of it. Yes. Expressing themselves in complete sentences. Editing their own work. Yeah. Topic sentences and concluding sentences. Yeah. Structure. Okay. Yeah. Having confidence. Yes. So much so. So the thing we want to stress to our students then is not only having that confidence, right, and establishing that, yes, you can have a voice in your writing, and yes, you are able to express yourselves, and it doesn't have to be one way. I think the beautiful thing is just stressing that writing is indeed a process. It's a process that we do have to kind of do in steps, but everybody's process looks different. It doesn't have to be all one way. Yeah, I really appreciate that somebody wrote worrying that it's only done one way, because that's not true. It is about saying, okay, your process can look a little different than mine. My process can look a little different than yours. But the important thing to stress is that there is a process. Yeah, so just helping our students really develop that. One thing I did want to point out, and I'll be able to share it with you all then later too, is a series of blogs that I wrote for Seeds of Literacy, and it's just about that writing process. So here then I'll share all these, but just kind of talking about the different stages of the writing process. Too often then our students get stuck kind of, yeah, with that first sentence, as we often do, right? But remembering that it is not just about getting started, right? It is then just let's organize our ideas, let's work through it, let's figure out what comes next. But it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect right away, because really that step where we get to revise is where we get to spend the most amount of time really refining our ideas and making sure that they are coherent, that they are the correct structure, that we're really digging into the content. Because one of the things that I find that my students struggle with the most is worrying about the grammar. And with grammar then, we want to kind of let that take a back seat. We don't want to focus too much on that right away, because it may then kind of pull focus from getting at the core of what we're trying to do, which is communicate ideas. So yeah, just emphasizing that writing is a process, taking it in stages. It doesn't all have to be done at one time. Absolutely. Getting them comfortable with trying different graphic organizers, trying ways to approach it as well, making sure they find whatever's going to work best for them. All right. So now we reach that point where we're going to talk about actually writing for these high school equivalency tests. So as we said earlier, way back at the beginning of the presentation, what are our students' most common questions? So many of them are, do I really have to write an essay? Why do I have to write this? Do I get to pick this topic? And our concern then is, how do we help our students approach such a complex task? Because it is a very complex task, right? And it's not a lot of time. And that can be very intimidating for our students. So time management becomes really crucial. And that's something that, as we were just saying though, writing is a process. So trying to rush that process then too can be really difficult for students. So I first kind of want to talk about the GED extended response. So for those of you who are very comfortable with the GED extended response and kind of know the format, this will hopefully look very familiar. But I do just want to kind of stress a couple of things. So number one, this is the format of it. So right away we see already it presents some issues. Students who are not comfortable writing on a computer, this can be intimidating. Students who are not comfortable just navigating between page 1 and page 2, right, to find the articles. It can all take so much longer just to get comfortable with the technology that the information is presented in. So that barrier we can even have right there for us. But then in addition to it, they are asked to read 2 texts with opposing viewpoints on a topic. And then they have to analyze the 2 texts to determine which writer presents the stronger case. They are being asked to develop your own argument, in which you explain how one position is better supported than the other. Okay, so how many things are they actually being asked to do within this essay? Yeah, so how many things? Go ahead, put it in the chat. How many things are we being asked to do? Too many, yes. Oh, thank you, Joni. Yeah, this format changed. Okay, excellent. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, half the size it is now. It is a little bit larger, which helps. Yeah. Read, analyze, plan, write. Absolutely. That is a lot to do in 45 minutes. So we have to then help our students figure out, how do I get all of this done at one time and within that 45-minute time restraint. So one thing I just wanted to point out then as well, if we look at, so this is from when the test originally changed in 2014, they came up with a guide and also a scoring rubric, right? So this can be very helpful for instructors. It shows different sample essays and different types of responses. However, I want to look just at the rubric itself. So it's being, they're being scored on three different traits is what they call it. So creation of argument and use of evidence. And then, hold on, I'm going to do it this way. Then we get the second rubric all the way down here. So trait number 2 is development of ideas in organizational structure. And then we get to the clarity and command of standard English conventions. So that first trait, though, is the response, right? Is that critical analysis of this topic. So when we look at then what they're asked to do, we want to make sure then that we know, or that our students know, excuse me, that they are being asked to do a rhetorical analysis. They're not being asked to give their opinion on the topic. They are asked to give which one is best supported. This would always be the very first assignment I would teach in my college composition courses, is a rhetorical analysis. So they are being asked to do that college level writing, which can be very intimidating. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Joan. So,
Carol, we were not seeing the rubric that you were sharing.
Oh, no, I apologize. Okay, well, that will all be included as well. So yes. I'll make sure then that everybody is able to see that.
Definitely, we can include that with the follow-up materials.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you.
All right. But so, this essay prompt then can be so intimidating for our students. It's about then supporting them through what is the best approach. All right. Now, the HiSET writing sample prompt looks a little bit different. So this is a test of your writing skills. Your response will be scored based on development of a central position, clear organization of ideas, and language use, and then clarity and correctness of writing conventions. So again, I want to stress that the emphasis is always on the development of the ideas. So often our students get stuck on, oh no, is this written properly? I'm not sure that, I'm using the comma correctly. And so that way, we want to make sure we are emphasizing to our students, it's about the development of those ideas, and just getting their ideas onto the page. So here then they're asked, below you will find two passages in which the authors put forth differing perspectives on an issue of importance. Read both passages carefully, noting the strengths and weaknesses of each discussion. Then you will write an essay in which you explain your own opinion on the issue. Okay, so what is the difference between the HiSET and GED essay prompt? Reader's opinion. Yes, thank you. About your own opinion. So here with the HiSET, they are asking students, what is your opinion? So that means then students are allowed to really enter their voice into the conversation. And that's what we want to stress though, is what is really being asked, understanding the prompt first and foremost, and then going into how do we approach it. Okay, so how do we approach it? By using templates. Okay. As I mentioned, in that book, The Moves That Matter in Academic Writing, they talk a lot about incorporating templates. It's a way for students to feel a little bit more secure in their writing because it's given a structure that they can exist within, and then having some freedom to play around with it. So when I approach the GED essay or HSE, or excuse me, HiSET essay with students, I present them this template that I put together. So it's something where first and foremost, we break down that time barrier, right? So thinking about how much time do I spend on each one of those components. So reading and pre-writing, then given the time to write, and then editing. Editing is, again, the thing that should be stressed the least because grammar and mechanics, yes, can be very important, but it's so important first to get those thoughts on the page. And then, of course, talking about how to approach that critical analysis. And so I always use the crap test with my students. It's something that can be very helpful. I found it online years ago, but it's thinking about whether or not your source is full of crap, right? And then how to use all of those skills within this time. I was just recently talking to a coworker about this, how really this component is so difficult because you have to do all of this while reading through those two articles. You have to do the critical analysis of them as well. So then when they do approach the writing, using a template can be so helpful, giving the structure of just, listen, they're asking for 4 to 7 paragraphs, but if you have 4 strongly developed paragraphs, then it is much better than having 5 or 7 weakly developed paragraphs, because again, it's about the organization of it. It's about the content of those ideas and the strength of them. So here then, I've put together these templates. I would be happy to share. I have one for the GED as well as for the HiSET. But it's just getting students comfortable with, again, those topic sentences. Some of you mentioned topic sentences, concluding sentences can be so difficult for students. So taking out some of the guesswork and what needs to be done. And that template work can be really, really helpful. All right. So last but not least, we have to talk about grammar. Yay, grammar. Okay, so what are some of your students' biggest concerns with grammar? All right, put it in the chat for me. Biggest concerns with grammar. Oh, I will definitely share. All right, spelling, punctuation. Yes, I was actually just about to type punctuation. Commas, agreement, tenses. Yes. Spelling. Feeling there are too many rules. Yes. One thing I want this to definitely mention is our students focus so much on learning the rules. However, as we know, with the English language, it feels like 70% of the time then the rules apply, but then the other 30% they don't. So it's knowing like, how do we navigate that? Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for sharing, Steve. Yeah. Comma equals pause. Yeah. Pronouns. What they hear is different than, or is it from? Yes. Thank you, Mary. Yeah, it can be so difficult, right, to navigate that. So one of the ways to kind of help our students approach this, as I mentioned, is to de-emphasize it until we get to that point where they have a command over their ideas. They have a command over critically analyzing what they're reading, and then we can spend some time on grammar. And even here, though, I would encourage everybody to kind of focus on just a couple of those rules first, really figure out through some diagnostic writing what each of our students are kind of struggling with, and then focus on the rules that would help them the most. Yeah, and it can be really helpful and beneficial to then also pair students together so that they can work in small groups on issues that are common amongst them. So we can kind of use grammar as a way to not only learn correct punctuation, some spelling, some sentence structure, all of that, then we can also use it to kind of help teach each other as well. In some of my classes, I used to have something called grammar wars, where I would break the class into teams, and then we'd be able to kind of have some lightweight competition, you know, some kind competition, and yeah, doing it through just some group work and really being able to see what our peers are doing and how we can help approach it together. Because again, writing is not done in a vacuum, it's done collaboratively. Thank you so much, guys, for participating. I'm seeing, yeah, where they're struggling and give direct lessons. Yes. In the context of students writing. Yes, no grammar books. Can be so helpful, right? Because we can get so stuck on just those rules. Subject verb agreement. Yeah, parts of speech. Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you all so much. So here I want to make sure I have enough time then to answer questions as well. So I'm going to make sure, here's my works cited page. Again, you'll be able to have access to all of this after the presentation. But does anybody have questions? I'd love to take questions now. Lauren or Danielle, I'm not sure in the Q&A if we'd like to take a look at that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kara, for all the amazing information. There are no questions right now in the Q&A, so feel free to type those in there and we'll have Kara answer them. I don't see any coming in yet, but I wonder if you could just speak a little more while we're waiting for questions to come in about the value of helping students find their voice. You mentioned that in the beginning, and a lot of times people want to teach to the essay, to the test specifically. But can you talk a little bit more just about the value overall of giving students their voice and finding that through writing?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that question. Well, as we all know, in working with adult learners, something has happened in their lives that prevented them from finishing their education in the traditional way. And often that comes with some very severe and traumatic experiences then with the education system. And a lot of our students come to us and they are uncertain, right? Uncertain about themselves, uncertain about how they can get through this, how they can not only get their GED, but then move on with the rest of their lives, right? And one of the things that we can really help develop in our students is that sense of confidence, is that sense of, yes, beyond the classroom, I have the skills I need. Beyond the classroom, this is the power of education. Education is something that is so empowering, and it can unlock so much. And it's a lifelong process. Actually, at the conference last week, I heard the term like life-wide learning as well. And that's something that I really truly believe in helping students find their voice, maybe within a system and a structure where they didn't feel they were heard before, right? Because with the education system, they may feel as if they weren't heard, or they were left out, or that their voice was not valued. So giving them the opportunity to say, yes, I hear you. Yes, I appreciate it. And yes, you have something to say. It can open all kinds of doors for our students. I hope that answered it.
Absolutely. It's such a valuable lesson, and I think you phrase it so beautifully. So thank you for that. We do have a couple questions that have come in.
Yes.
The first question is to please tell us more about how you use grammar wars with your students.
Yes. Okay. So grammar wars. So typically I depending on the size of the class, would do 2 groups. It can be more than 1 group. And actually, in talking with Todd and some other of my colleagues, that idea of like pairing students together based on what their particular needs may be could be a really great approach. But then I will typically have just like 5 to 10 questions, no more than that, or 5 to 10 sentences, because really it's kind of about the excitement of finishing quickly, the excitement of working together. But it would be like an editing passage. So it would be edit this passage or edit this sentence. And it would be whichever team finishes first would get then, of course, you know, some bragging rights, and maybe also a little food incentive or something. But any way to make approaching grammar fun and team building, and being able to see it again as that collaborative group effort. Yeah, because any way we can emphasize that writing is not a solitary act, and it's not something that's done within kind of that vacuum, can be so helpful. Yeah. Anyway, if you want to talk more about grammar wars, I'd be happy to do so.
Great, thanks. We've got quite a few questions coming in here. We've got about 10 minutes left, but Kara will stay on for a few minutes at the end to make sure that we answer all of the questions, and we'll get those recorded so that if you do need to jump off right at the end of the webinar, you won't miss those. They'll be at the end of the recording. So the next question is, what is the balance between content and mechanics in the HiSET scoring process?
I'm sorry, could you ask that just one more time?
Sure. What is the balance between content and mechanics in the HiSET scoring process?
So in the HiSET scoring process, it's done a little bit differently because their score is just 1 out of 6. So it is not kind of broken up into traits like the GED test. So the GED has those 3 specific traits, and each one is 2 points. With HiSET, the writing test is all compiled into either ranging from inadequate competence or highly competent. So as far as the conventions of standard written English and the grammar, it is the very last thing listed as part of that score. So as far as like the emphasis on it, I don't know how heavily it is weighted, the exact percentages or anything like that. However, the fact that it is often the last thing listed means then that our focus really should be on the content. And also then, of course, one of the things that tends to hopefully sometimes happen a little bit naturally, but as we get more comfortable expressing our ideas and getting comfortable with the content, the grammar then and the mechanics can kind of help flow out of that, because we want to be as clear and concise in our language as possible. So that's something that kind of as we're working on how do I express my ideas, then that grammar and that proper sentence structure can kind of flow from it.
Yep.
I hope
Yeah,
that
and
helps.
and I'll just add too, in our
Yeah.
experience in working with HiSET states, it seems like from some of the feedback that we get from HiSET and from the states themselves and testing centers with HiSET is that if the grammatical or spelling errors are understandable,
Mhm.
it will not cause a student to fail. If there's just a few, they'll be kind of looked past. If it becomes not understandable, if they have entire paragraphs that are one sentence with just comma, 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 lots of run-ons, those will mean points deductions. But if it's just here and there and it's understandable to the graders, it typically has not been a problem with HiSET. They seem to be pretty understanding. So
Yeah, thank you. And even in the highly competent category, it states, demonstrates a high degree of competence with the conventions of standard written English, but may have minor errors. So it isn't saying this is a perfect demonstration of spelling and grammar, but instead, as was just pointed out, a deep understanding of it. But maybe with some errors. Yeah, absolutely.
yes, yep, definitely. It's good to have that realistic view too. And as you mentioned, as you become a better reader, you become more familiar with those mechanics and can more easily do that in your own writing. Let's see, our next question is, what percent does the extended response count in the total RLA score?
Okay, so for the GED, the GED language arts section of the test is out of 200 points. The essay is 6 points. So each one of those traits are ranked from 0 to 2. So students can earn a total of 6 points for the essay, but out of the total 200. So that question of, do I really have to write an essay? Maybe something our students are wondering. However, with the HiSET, the writing test is in of itself very separate from the reading. So it is emphasized more. And then also with the HiSET section, there are 60 multiple choice, like editing and writing questions, but then the essay is the other large component of that. And students have 120 minutes to approach the whole thing. However, it does mean, depending on how they're able to break up their time and time management, they could have up to an hour to write an essay. So it's weighted very differently for both the HiSET and the GED.
Thank you. And we have another GED question here. Could you speak about the GED essay a bit? I'm still so frustrated because I know some of my students can at least get points on the second 2 traits, even if they miss the mark on the first trait, yet it is still so hard to get me points.
Okay. I apologize, repeat that one more time. I got a little distracted in the chat. Joni and Steve, thank you so much for correcting me. So the GED RLA, the points are doubled. I apologize. So it's actually 12 points. And then Steve is saying approximately 20% of the total score. Thank you so much for correcting me there. And yes,
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
And
I have had teachers tell students you don't have to write the essay. However, what we want to stress is if we are able to build up that confidence with writing, we want students to be able to write an essay and to express themselves. It goes beyond just, passing this test. Okay, I apologize. Please ask the question one more time.
that's fine. And I think when we send out the follow-up email, we can also send links specifically to GED and HiSET scoring guidelines for the essays for each of the individual tests. I think those would be good to include with this follow-up email. So we'll send those out. The question was, could you speak about the GED essay a bit? And it was in relation to students getting points on the second 2 traits, even if they miss the mark on the first trait, but they're still having trouble getting the points necessary.
Okay. So with the GED essay then, as we broke it down into those 3 traits, do you mean miss the mark as far as the rhetorical analysis piece and incorporating their own opinion? Because from my understanding then, you can get points in the other 2 traits without necessarily getting all the points for the first trait of responding to the prompt accurately and appropriately. However, then it does require that organization of ideas. So it is stressed that there needs to be proper structure within the essay, and they're looking for things like transitions. They're looking for things like indents to mark a new paragraph. They're looking for the connectives that bring everything together, and then really that development of ideas. Are they able to quote from the essay, or excuse me, from the two essays? Are they able to bring in some development of the ideas? And then with the grammar and mechanics, they are looking for more so correct sentence structure. They're looking for how is it, how are the sentences structured? And then also, is there a varying sentence structure? Are they able to go beyond just piecemealing sentences together? Are they able to show the connections? And they de-emphasize spelling as well. So since there is not a spell check, it's similar to the HiSET in that if there are some errors, they can still get points. However, it's really about bringing together all three of those traits.
Thank you. Joni, if that did not answer your question, feel free to post again and post another question. So we're just about at the end of the hour here. So we will get to these other questions. Before we do, Kara, could you go to the next slide?
Absolutely.
I just want to point out some of the upcoming webinars. This webinar is part of a series in the Teacher Training Plus project, where we have 4 tracks for high school equivalency, which Kara is doing for us. We also have an English language learner track, in addition to using published materials in a basic literacy track. Each of the tracks will have 3 webinars throughout the course of the year and a series of coaching sessions to follow those webinars to help teachers really get their questions answered and work with the presenters. So here on this slide, you can see the 2 upcoming webinars for the HSE track on the left. And then on the right are the 2 webinars that are upcoming in this series, the first series this fall, for the published materials track and then the basic literacy track. Those are coming up next week. So feel free to register for those as well. Danielle has put the links for the HSE track and the project in general on our website. She's put those in the chat right there. So thank you for that. And feel free to check out those other webinars and reach out to us if you have any questions about those. All right, so let's. Thank you so much, Kara.
Well, we can. Yeah, would you like me to hang out?
Yeah, let's.
And yeah, I'm happy,
we've got
happy to do so.
Absolutely. If you would like to stay on, we're going to have Kara just answer the rest of these questions in the chat. If you do need to sign off, we understand and respect your time, and we hope to see you again soon at a future webinar. So thank you very much. You're welcome to hang out and listen as we answer these final questions.
Yeah, thank you all for attending today. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Hope to see you again soon.
All right. So the next question in the chat is, why is there a time limit on writing the essay?
Oh,
age-old question.
I only had an answer for that. Yes, there's so much that can be frustrating about writing for the high school equivalency tests. It's timed, unfortunately, because that's how standardized tests work. Fortunately, there's a time limitation on each one of the sections of the test. There's a time limitation on the writing component as well. However, as I mentioned, if you kind of ask me, 45 minutes is a difficult and very restraining amount of time to work in, because it's not just asking students to write, it's also asking them to respond. So it can be very frustrating to see then that there is that time restriction. However, kind of as I mentioned in the templates, then it's helpful to have that structure kind of already in place and kind of in the back of your mind, and then you can break up your time so that pre-reading, you're able to do a little bit pre-writing while you're reading, that you can really think critically about what is being was being asked of you, and being able to analyze those essays before even starting the writing process. Yeah, time management, it can be very, very tricky.
Definitely. And it definitely speaks also, as you talked about before, in preparing for that time and not just practicing writing, but practicing timed writing before they get to the test.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Practice, practice, practice. Getting comfortable with those critical thinking skills and those analysis skills are so crucial. But again, separate from writing, at least as far as when we think about like timing, right? It's again, connecting reading and writing so much that we have to show students how they're linked together.
Absolutely. Very important to strategize. Our next question is, do you have any specific tips for teaching online?
So Seeds of Literacy moved to a virtual class during the pandemic, and we have been able to continue with that virtual class. It's been widely popular. So some of the ways I would suggest is using some popular things like Jamboards. I've used that a little bit. Even just asking students to participate in the chat, or if you're able to put your whiteboard up, any way to make it interactive. I would say even if students feel more comfortable kind of speaking rather than typing in a virtual setting, if they want to then, you know, participate, and you can type it onto the screen so that everybody can see it. Also, I would recommend getting into any of the Google Classrooms, Blackboard. There's tons of stuff available where you can also present things ahead of time as well, so that students are prepared while coming into class. Yeah, any way though to make sure that that sense of community is still there amongst writing, and that they have the support in a virtual setting. We've also even done like our book club virtually as well. And it's about just, yeah, getting students the materials kind of ahead of time, and the platform can be a whole wide variety of whatever you're most comfortable kind of using. But yeah, absolutely. The grammar wars I'll have to think about, maybe breaking people up into breakout rooms, and having them come back then first, or kind of do the call for help, ask for help button first. Yeah, there's tons of ways to kind of adapt it to a virtual setting.
Thank you. Yeah, COVID certainly forced all of us to get very creative online. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the next question is, in scoring TOEFL essays, compound and complex sentence structures, introductory phrases, and academic vocabulary make the difference in a satisfactory score and a strong score. Do you know if this is the same with GED and HiSET? And what's the value of adding compound or complex sentence structures?
So the value in adding that complexity to the writing really just shows, for instance, for HiSET, it falls into that highly competent and clearly competent category. So that can make the difference on the HiSET between, you know, a score of 4, which is competent, or clearly competent, which is 5 or 6 even, which is the highly. So being able to kind of extend even the level of comfortability with writing can help students score a couple more points on the HiSET in that regard. For the GED then, when we're looking at trait number 3, which is the conventions of standard English, that's where they'll really emphasize varying sentence structure, what kind of vocabulary is used. And so that could help then get students points even in that trait, by being able to help them foster the vocabularies or their comfortability with varying sentence structure.
Good, thanks. And the next 2 questions related to scoring. The first, I can answer very briefly because we will include this. Where can I find an example essays for the HiSET to let my students see what an essay is to HiSET graders? It is on their website, and we will include links to HiSET and GED examples and scoring guidelines with the webinar recording. So then our last question also relates to scoring is, how do you feel about the automated scoring engine?
Oh, okay. I was not going to mention this during the presentation because it breaks my heart. As an English teacher, as somebody who has taught reading and writing for as long as I have, it is difficult to think about it being graded by an algorithm. I know there's an objectiveness to it and also the immediacy of the answer. However, it also then, I think, takes away some of the writer's ability to be able to show their abilities, like even outside of the conventional structure, outside of the traits that are being examined. Because often then what's happening is, as it's being graded by an automated system, it's not looking for like growth with it. It's such a difficult thing to kind of navigate. I have personal kind of qualms with it. But yeah, I know it can be very beneficial, but also very difficult to navigate. And I think makes it hard for students then to really get those points on the essay. Anyway.
Definitely, the automation really misses those nuances in the language. It certainly does. Are there any tips that you give students when you know that their essay will be scored by a computer as opposed to a human?
Absolutely. They are looking for very specific things, so it's important to kind of discuss those with students. For instance, as I mentioned, there's some things even just with like organizing the paragraphs where they want the like indentation to show a paragraph break. They want things like the transition words and phrases. They want the quotation marks to show that you have considered and looked at the two essays. So those kind of things immediately they're going to be kind of picking out. So students can reliably kind of use those in order to hopefully get some points. Also, in addition to that, using the templates, it kind of takes a little bit of the anxiety off of needing to create something brand new. I had a student who just used one of the templates and told me like, oh, I was so glad to see this and to try it because it helped me kind of stay focused and I was able to actually get through the entire essay. So using something that is more structured like that until they get comfortable with, okay, these are the kinds of things that they're looking for, will help then as they move forward.
Thank you very much. That's great. That looks like all of the questions that we had here. I don't see any others coming in. So Kara, I want to thank you so much again for sharing your expertise with us. You had some really fantastic tips, and we'll get all of these resources out within the next week to everyone, including the webinar recording, Kara's presentation, where you can see the links to all the materials she discussed, and then those additional links and resources that we talked about as well. We'll get all those in there for you and send that via email. Thanks to everyone who stuck around to the end with us.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks again. We'll see everyone at a future webinar. Bye, everyone.
I appreciate everybody so much. Yeah, have a good one.
Bye.
All right, bye.